Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be going over the Paladin aura known as Holy Freeze. Holy Freeze is one of my favorite auras, and that's just simply because it's so ridiculously powerful. And I'd like to go over these real quick. Let's take off of this dude, Shanks. Well, actually, I want to keep that up. But basically, Holy Freeze is a aura that specifically gives massive amounts of cold damage, as well as a cold pulsing damage, but that's not all. Unlike with Holy Fire and Holy Freeze, or Holy Shock, which are pretty much primarily damage auras, Holy Freeze is more of a utility aura in that it gives another effect, which is the enemy slowed by effect. So not to be confused with cold damage, which cold damage is a chilling effect. Chilling effects are completely different than enemies slowed by. When you chill an enemy, they do get slower, of course. But when you freeze an enemy with the, when you freeze an enemy, they actually get completely frozen. But when you slow an enemy down with the enemy slowed by effect, it actually does not count as a cold effect at all. It actually counts as something completely different known as a slow. So 30% slow at level 1 is actually pretty good already. But when you start to pump points into it very quickly, even with just 1 point, it goes to level 15, which is a 52% slow. And if you beef it up high enough, if you throw 20 points into it, you'll notice that now we're at level 34 with a 57% slow. And the damage output isn't amazing without the synergies. So right now we have 485 to 490 damage added to our attack, and we have a 97 to 196 damage pulse. Now, you can beef this up by going with Resist Cold and Salvation, which are going to get you a pretty big damage bump in the Holy Freeze aura. So now we're at 2,618 to 2,645 damage, and 523 to 1,058 damage on the pulse. Now, this isn't even as high as it goes. Let's go over to Frosty Cheeks, which is my Holy Freeze Paladin that I made. If you'd like to check his video out, there's actually a Theorycraft video up on him where I spent a lot of time trying to develop his character. And I really kind of did figure out exactly what it was I needed to do with him. But it looks like I am missing some of his equipment, of course. I love to steal equipment from characters. Seems like my gag. But utilizing the correct equipment, you can actually make some pretty crazy Holy Freeze characters. And it looks like I'm missing the strength that I need. Let's just go ahead and fix this guy real quick so he can actually put on his equipment. Bink, bink, bink. And Holy X characters tend to use things like Zeal. That's your main damage output right there, because you want to be able to attack as fast as possible. And this is something that I failed to go over in the Holy Fire video, but let me talk about this aspect really quickly. Because you are dishing out elemental damage, which is not subjected to the weapon that you have on, you actually want to attack as fast as possible because you can apply that cold damage quickly. The quicker you can apply that cold damage, the better. There is also another aspect to the Holy X auras, which has been added recently in one of the patches, is that it does more damage with the pulse, depending on how close you are to the target. So right now it tells you that I'm doing 996 cold damage on the top end of my pulse damage, which is, you know, not bad. But when I'm in melee range, it's actually 200% of what that states. So we're looking at more like 2,000 damage when I'm close to the target. Now, when you level it up high enough, the radius goes like kind of bonkers. Right now it's at 24.6 yards. And so when you go out and you actually utilize it in an area, let's go to Canyon of the Magi real quick. What you're going to notice is that pretty much every monster within range gets chilled by the aura. And let me actually put the aura on. And the chilling effect also slows them down. Now, it's important to note that slows target does not work on casters. And I'm not exactly sure why it doesn't work on casters, but it doesn't work on casters. This is because the reasons. So when you're out and about, when you're, like in Chaos Sanctuary, or, when you're in, say, Halls of Pain and you come across a bunch of caster-type monsters, they're not going to be affected by the Holy Freeze aura the same way that the melees will. It's also important to note that the Holy Freeze aura, when it procs on the target, will trigger effects like lightning enchantment, various things that will come out of the monster when you hit them. But as you can see, it is dishing out a pretty steady amount of damage to these targets, like, all the time. Another thing that we need to talk about is the slows target ability, how it stacks. So the cap for slows target is actually 80%. And if you have enough slows target equipment, you can reach that cap. But it doesn't quite work the way that you would think. So let's take, for instance, a mythical number. Let's just say that a monster has a speed of 100. And we are currently at 57% enemy slow. How it works is it subtracts the 57%, like this. And now the monster is at 43. So basically a speed of 43% of what he normally is. If you have another, say, 20% or 40% decrease in speed from another item, like, for instance, I have one on right now, which is slows target by 10% from Arachnid's Mesh. It doesn't add to the slows target from Holy Freeze. It doesn't go to 67%. Instead, what it does is it subtracts from the number that's left over from the first number subtracting. So at 57%, we ended up with 43. Well, 43 is then subtracted by 10%, which brings us to 38.7, and so forth and so on. So every slows target that you apply to a monster is going to subtract from what was left over after the last one subtracted from the monster, which can go all the way to the point where it reaches the cap of 80%. Well, 80% of 100 would be 20. And so I was actually going to show you is 20. So once we reach the 20% speed number, it cannot go any lower, but it's kind of difficult to reach that number unless you have multiple slows target effects going off at the same time. Now, there is a mercenary within the game that has slows target on it, and it's actually a very popular one because slows target is very powerful to help keep you and your mercenary alive. And that is the Act 2 Mercenary. So you can buy an Act 2 Mercenary that has a relatively decent Holy Freeze aura of, level 16, which isn't too bad. It's unsynergized, so it doesn't get a huge amount of damage, not like the synergized version. But it does have a decent amount of slows target and a decent range of 14 yards. Not quite as good as the 24.6 yards of the level 32 version. And of course, if you can get Holy Freeze even higher than that, then it's definitely going to have even more damage output and even larger radius. But the one that comes from the Mercenary will stack with other effects. So it is actually a really common use case scenario to take the Holy Freeze Merc and combine it with things like the Clay Golem on the Necromancer, which also has slows target, Decrepify Curse, which is also slows target, and so forth and so on. And if you combine enough slows target effects on a monster, you can start to make some magical things happen. For instance, Bale will teleport away, from you pretty much all the time. However, if you apply enough slows target to Bale, he will have a hard time activating any of his abilities because he will be so slow that it's almost like he's literally stuck in time. And you will be able to interrupt any of the abilities that he tries to put out relatively easily. So not only does Holy Freeze have very nice damage output for a Holy X aura, it also has very good utility as well, in that it prevents monsters from being able to fight back as easily. The difference is pretty staggering when you actually, utilize it, because having a aura that slows down every monster within 24.6 yards is pretty massive. I mean, if I take this back to Kingdom of the Magi, you can pretty much just run through the monsters like, laugh at them as they try to get closer to you. Like, most of them will not even be able to catch you. And a lot of this is because it's combining two effects. So a lot of people think it's just the slowest target on Holy Freeze that actually does most of the heavy lifting. But it's actually the chill effect also that's having a huge effect. So chill and enemies slowed by actually do stack together. And because Holy Freeze is a cold damage effect, it is also applying the chill at the same time as it's applying the enemy slow. Now, some monsters in the game, like ghosts, cannot be slowed. As you can see here, the ghosts are not being slowed at all by the effect. There is a short list of monsters within the game that enemies slowed by does not work on. Death Lords, ghosts, gloams, just to name a few. Those monsters, unfortunately, are completely unaffected by pretty much any crowd control effects. Like enemies slowed by, chilling. I'm trying to remember the other ones that they're not affected by. But really, for the case of this video, it's just important to note that Holy Freeze does not stop those particular monsters. Now, not all Death Lords are immune to Holy Freeze. It's actually kind of weird. So some of them are, and some of them aren't. There's a couple that appear in places like Crystalline Passage, Glacial Trail, and these areas, these ones are actually not immune to the freezing effects. It's actually only the ones that appear in Worldstone specifically that are immune to the Holy Freeze effect. And it's really annoying, because when you come across a extra fast, like, fanaticized pack of Death Lords down here in Worldstone Keep, you really wish that Holy Freeze actually did work on them. But do keep in mind that it doesn't not affect all of them, only just specific ones. However, it will not affect any ghosts in any place, and it will not affect any gloams. However, that's only in Hell difficulty. So in Nightmare difficulty and in normal difficulty, Holy Freeze will actually affect the ghosts. And to show this off, I can go to Nightmare real quick, and we'll hop down in Arcane Sanctuary. And I can show you that Holy Freeze does actually affect the ghosts in Nightmare and Normal. As you can see, they are getting slowed in Nightmare and Normal difficulty. So it's interesting to note that Holy Freeze will actually be very useful all the way up until Hell difficulty when the monsters that are immune to the slows target by effects start to appear. That's when things start to get a little bit hairy. Death Lords in particular tend to be one of the more nasty ones, because they'll run up on you like a friggin' gang crew because you made the wrong sign. I don't even know. It's freaking scary as I don't even know what. When you have one of those extra fast fanaticized packs of Death Lords run up on you, like, you scream like a little girl. I mean, that's just, unfortunately. And you try your best to get away, because you just know that they're just going to rip through your mercenary. They're going to rip through your minions, and they're going to come for you next. As soon as they get a chance, they're coming for them cheeks. Frosty Cheeks is just one of the characters that I've made with Holy Freeze. There are some other ways that you can get Holy Freeze besides the mercenary and native use. One of them is a very expensive rune word called... why did I forget the name of it all of a sudden? Isn't it called Doom? I think it's called Doom. Doom. Let me verify real quick before I make a fool out of myself. Yes, Doom is the rune word, and it has level 12 Holy Freeze aura. Now, the Holy Freeze aura on Doom is really not high enough level to actually output any significant damage, but it does give you a very nice holy, slows target by effect, which is definitely very nice. Unfortunately, one of the main issues with Doom is, well, number one, it's expensive, but that's not really what I'm talking about. It's expensive, and it also has, no durability. Unfortunately, it can only be made in axes, hammers, and polearms, and if you want to make it in a one-handed weapon, you're kind of relegated to axes, which have basically no durability, and you're going to be in town repairing the thing every 5 minutes, which is unfortunate. it's sad. I would really like to see Doom get a little bit of a patch there to change the durability issues, or just kind of fix some of the axe durabilities, because the axe durabilities are so bad. Like one of the best axes in the game has a durability of 24, which makes it just awful, just absolutely awful to utilize. I think that's pretty much it for Holy Freeze. It is a absolutely amazing ability. It's amazing in native new use. It's amazing for mercenaries. It is amazing, honestly, just in general because of the slowest target effect, and it is great for tons of characters besides paladins. One of the, I think, most popular mercenaries in the pool right next to the Might Merc. Because if you don't need might, well, a defensive mercenary is just as valuable. In fact, it keeps him alive just as much as it keeps you alive. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just yakking about Holy Freeze and how amazing it is. And as always, keep freezing.